Welcome to Max Tech, and this is our review of the iPhone 15 Pro Max. I've been using the new iPhone 15 Pro Max for a week now, trying to decide if this is finally the year when many people should upgrade or maybe even switch from an Android phone. And despite my initial disappointment at Apple's event, I have to answer with an astounding yes. Now that doesn't mean that the road isn't a little bit bumpy, because I do have some complaints and issues with it, but overall, this phone passes my three-part formula for what it takes to make an upgrade-worthy phone. Let me explain. The first part that is so essential for making people feel like they got a good upgrade is actually how the phone makes you feel. As soon as we unboxed the 15 Pro Max, it was instantly obvious that this thing feels fresh and different, with there being no way of mistaking it with any of the previous iPhones. Right out of the gate, you'll feel the difference in weight distribution and how it feels to hold, now being 10% lighter than before, and it feels just so nice thanks to these new curved edges that feel so much better in the hand, no longer digging into your palm like it did before, but being perfectly swaddled. Now, part of that has to do with the new titanium metal that feels less grippy or sticky like the stainless steel. And as far as the looks, the titanium now looks amazing, along with the bezels that are now slimmer and honestly more immersive enough that you can feel the upgrade. So overall, it passes the feel test, which doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but deep down, subconsciously, it's actually the most important thing when it comes to upgrading your phone. Now, for part two of this upgrade formula, I believe the second most important thing is the experiences, or in other words, the things you can now experience with your new phone that you couldn't before, and the 15 Pro Max definitely passes this test. For example, there are subtle changes that are important to me, like the speakers, which are now much better than before, being louder and having higher quality. Just listen to this quick comparison clip. On top of that, there are other things like this cellular connectivity, which has clearly improved this year, especially when we tested the difference inside of our office surrounded by concrete walls, and that can make a huge experience difference for someone who was previously experiencing connectivity issues. Another one is the battery life, and honestly, I'm not that happy with it since I personally expected more, and over the past week, I'd say that it's basically around the same or maybe even slightly worse than before, depending on what I was doing, like gaming, which I'll get into in just a minute. But there are two things that I specifically want to focus on: the action button and the USB-C port. But first, I want to mention that MagSafe has been my single most favorite feature on the iPhone ever since the iPhone 12, and now it's getting better than ever with tons of MagSafe accessories on the market. But our sponsor ESR takes it a step further, allowing you to level up your MagSafe with the biggest and fastest MagSafe collection for iPhone 15. Now, ESR has been a long-term sponsor of this channel, but I honestly really enjoy their products, and now they have a new, more compact 25-watt 3-in-1 made for MagSafe charging stand that supports full speed 15-watt iPhone charging with cryo boost cooling tech, which makes it charge much faster than Apple's charger because it keeps the temperatures cool. It also gives you full 5-watt Apple Watch fast charging, as well as a charging pad for your AirPods, and this MagSafe charger is perfect to use with ESR's classic hybrid case with stash stand, which is thin, durable, has a very strong magnet, and it comes with a patented stash stand built into the camera bump. ESR also has their 15-watt made for MagSafe car charger, which also cools down your iPhone so it doesn't overheat, dim your display, and slow down charging. And finally, they have this cool 3-in-1 foldable travel charger with 5-watt Apple Watch fast charging as well, and you can check out the links to all of these down in the description below. Now, getting back to experiences, I honestly think that the action button button was a genius choice because that mute switch was sitting there doing nothing for many people for many years, including myself, and now the action button not only gives you a new way to conveniently access and control apps on your phone, but it gives you something much more important: a feeling of freedom. Yes, the action button single-handedly makes the iPhone feel a lot less locked down for the first time in many years, allowing you to do basically anything you want on your iPhone, from unlocking your Tesla or turning on the AC, or instantly accessing the camera and recording a video by touching nothing other than the action button alone, all the way to opening up a full menu list of shortcuts, and finally, something as simple as playing a tune for the heck of it. This action button just gives you a sense of freedom, which is so important, especially for Android users considering the switch to iPhone. And speaking of that, we have the USB-C port. Out of all of the things that surprised me about the iPhone 15 Pro Max when I actually got it in my hands, it was by far the USB-C port, because I honestly expected Apple to lock it down in some ways. But no, they didn't. Everything we tried to plug into the USB-C port worked instantly with no hiccups or reliability issues. We charged other devices with it, we plugged in SSDs to test out the external video recording feature, and even entire USB-C hubs with multiple devices connected, all of them working perfectly, including SD cards. We connected it to Apple's 6K Pro Display XDR and it instantly worked, showing up a full screen video. I even connected the MagSafe phone cooler from Razer and it actually powered it, lowering the temps down to under 12 degrees Celsius, which is insanely cold since it uses a thermoelectric Peltier cooling system. So I decided to go all out by purchasing Apple's multi-port HDMI adapter and basically creating a legit gaming console setup by connecting it to my 150-inch 4K projector using an Xbox controller to play COD Mobile, Genshin Impact, and Diablo Immortal on my couch. To get it running, I connected a power cable to charge the iPhone and a USB-A cable to run the phone cooler to ensure that there is no overheating at all, and it worked flawlessly. Now yes, this could hurt your battery health, so I tried it again without charging the iPhone at the same time to test the battery life, and after 2 hours and 10 minutes, the battery only went down to 82%, so that's gonna support basically over 10 hours of non-stop gaming, which is more than enough. But anyway, I'm shocked at how open the USB-C port is and the feeling of freedom it gives you compared to previous iPhones, making it so much easier for Android users to finally make the switch, especially since the 15 Pro's USB-C port has 10 gigabit per second transfer speeds compared to only 5 on the S23 Ultra. And now, with that said, let's get into part 3 of the upgrade formula, which is actually the specs like the cameras and the controversial A17 Pro chip. With the new iPhone 15 lineup, Apple has made the one upgrade I had hoped for many years. They've changed the default photo resolution to 24 megapixels across all main camera photo modes, including portraits. So for the first time in many years, you can instantly notice the difference in quality. Right away, Apple has put themselves ahead of every phone out there in terms of the default photo output. We recently did our blind camera test between the 15 Pro Max, the S23 Ultra, and the Pixel 7 Pro, and the iPhone won by a long shot thanks to this new 24 megapixel default output, along with Apple's new smart HDR5 algorithm that is a massive upgrade compared to last year's 14 Pro models. Sky and cloud details are back, and it enhances colors and shadows on the face and sweaters and jackets, especially during the sunset, being clearly ahead of the competition. And finally, we have the new 5x telephoto lens, which at first was a bit disappointing to me because it doesn't have variable zoom from 3x to 5x like I thought it would, but now that we've tried it, I am so happy with it. Just look at these 5x portrait photos with the 120mm focal length, instantly compressing the background, and honestly, for the first time ever, making these portraits look like they weren't shot on a smartphone. Yes, I'm going as far as to say that this 5x camera will fool so many people into thinking it was shot on a pro camera because they look just that good alongside smart HDR5. And the impressive part is that for detail shots, it actually is quite close in terms of detail when you compare it to the Galaxy S23 Ultra's 10x lens, but low light is where the 5x camera shines the most because Apple's tetraprism lens design allowed for a very large f2.8 aperture that lets in a lot of light. And on top of that, Apple added excellent stabilization to this lens, which means that you get incredibly good night mode photos using the 5x camera. So all in all, this is by far the best camera upgrade on the iPhone in many, many years, maybe even the best camera upgrade ever, thanks to the new 24 megapixel default mode, smart HDR5, and the new 5x camera, which shoots the best portraits I've ever seen. And now let's talk about the A17 Pro chip and whether it's good or a disappointment. You've probably heard all of the people talking about their phones overheating and getting so hot that charging stopped working, but the weird thing is that not everybody is experiencing this, and me personally, I'm not really experiencing it either. So here's what I think is going on. It might actually be a case of silicon lottery, so let me explain what that means. I believe that when TSMC was making these new 3nm chips based on the N3B process, they had a lot of issues with yield, which basically means the number of chips that passes Apple's efficiency standards, with the rest of them being thrown away. The yields were terrible, so I think what Apple had to do to improve the yields and make sure we have enough chips for the iPhones is that they had to lower the standards for the entire A17 Pro chip, which meant that they accepted more of them, which would have been thrown out, and maybe those ones are the ones that are experiencing more of the overheating issues. But because they had to lower the standards, that actually dropped the performance. So in order to give a good jump of 10% CPU and 20% GPU, Apple had to overvolt and overclock them, adding more power than they've ever added before. For example, the A17 Pro CPU can now peak at 14 watts of power, whereas the A14, A15, and A16 were at around 10 to 11 previously. And because of that, when you're opening up a bunch of apps, it causes the overheating issues, maybe on the chips that did not win the silicon lottery. And same thing for the GPU as well. The new A17 Pro's GPU is running at a peak of 11.5 watts compared to around 8 on the previous A15 and A16, which is 40% more power. And then looking at the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 on the Android side, it gives us more performance while only peaking at around 8 watts of power. So Apple's GPU is clearly falling behind in terms of performance per watt, and it's likely because of TSMC's low 3nm yields that caused Apple to lower their efficiency standards, forcing them to overvolt the chips to get better performance numbers for marketing. But with all that said, I honestly think that it's fine because the CPU is still in the lead, being the fastest chip ever in a smartphone, and while the GPU isn't the most efficient, I'm convinced that the new metal shader architecture, hardware ray tracing, and especially metal effects upscaling support are what makes this chip a winner. Just look at these comparisons between the quality of Genshin Impact with and without metal effects, and Dame Tech just shared this tweet showing off that the quality actually got better with the 15 Pro Max set to low settings with metal FX compared to the S23 Ultra at the highest environmental detail settings, which will basically give the iPhone the lead because it gets perfect 60 FPS with lower temps and longer battery life. So basically, metal effects is the way to go for gaming in the future. And those new GPU changes are the only reasons why we can now play AAA games on the 15 Pro, including the ones that Apple showed off, like Death Stranding. But jumping back to the 15 Pro Max in general, I think it's an absolutely great upgrade due to the fresh curved titanium design that makes you feel like you have a new phone, along with major improvements like the 5x telephoto camera, the USB-C port, the fun action button, and the gaming upgrades within the A17 Pro chip. So hopefully you enjoyed this review, and if you did, please consider subscribing above. Definitely check out those MagSafe accessories from ESR and one of those videos right over there. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.